Good.
Just to let you know, the reason why certain people are missing is because we have them taking COVID tests. So they're not like just not in
Okay.
class.
Alrighty. Um, all right. One last opportunity. You had something to share? You were going to say the same thing Ryan just said? Oh, okay. All right. Due to the fact that we're missing some folks, I'm going to shuffle things around a bit. So what I would like you to do is get your booklet and turn to page, well, there it is. Turn to page 32. There's a graphical representation of this on page 31, but I want you to work off of page 32. And what we're going to do is we're going to spend the next hour in prayer. So, and just individually, you can go anywhere. And like I'll give you 5 minutes to get wherever you're going. So we'll say 10:30, your hour will be up. So take your break at 10:30, and at 10:45 we'll start the next topics. So on that page, the idea is, and take your Bible with you, the idea is you'll spend 5 minutes each on each of those 12 segments, those 12 types of prayer, and use that page 32 as just sort of a guide for each of those 5 minutes. And then, we'll show up here after break. And if you bump into any of the people who aren't here, have them do that same thing. And, based on when they show up, they could do 3 minutes per segment or 2 minutes per segment or whatever instead of 5. Okay? Question?
No, Caitlin, could you put that in the MIC chat? Thank you, Scott.
Alrighty. Good. So I will see you here at 10:45, and you will have had your break. All right?
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
All right. All right. We still aren't all here, huh?
Some of us are missing.
Bree's out of town and
Antonio
Jason's in his room.
Yeah, we have one person who's sick.
How about Antonio
Not
and
COVID. Sure did.
Antonio's sick and
Oh, he is?
no, Antonio just walked in.
Okay.
Hey guys.
Everybody's, something's going around, so. Not COVID though?
No, it's
Not COVID. Cheers.
Don't breathe, y'all.
But apparently there are other sicknesses other than COVID.
Yeah.
What?
No,
What?
what?
What's with that?
Yeah,
That's not a thing,
monkeypox.
obviously.
Yeah,
Yeah,
monkeypox.
That means that people turn into monkeys.
all right. So, for everybody that's here, is there anybody who did not get an email from me this morning? Yep, please check.
Oh yeah, that was okay. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, just to make it clear, in case you were not aware, next 3 months I'll be in touch with you regularly. So, the first month after, I'll be in touch with you once a week, and then once every 2 weeks the second month, and once more at the end of the third month, seeing how things are going related to, stuff we cover. And then at the end of 3 months, I kind of give you several options for whether you want me to ever contact you again, and the sort of the nature of that or the intensity of that, and so on. So that's why I need to make sure I have everybody's email, plus a lot of resources related to what we'll be covering. I'll be probably sending out tonight or tomorrow. So it's important that I have everybody's email. All right. Any thoughts about that prayer wheel exercise?
That's amazing.
I really appreciate it. That was really good.
Okay.
It was so good. I felt really encouraged and stirred up, and I was able to send voice memos to people and pray for others, and I just loved the whole time.
Good. If you do like it a lot, I've got about 8 other versions that are, the same format but different kind of content, and so I can share those with you if you're interested. Yes.
How do you have stuff that could lead into a kind of consistent Bible study, or how to formulate that with your quiet time, with your personal quiet time throughout a period?
We will talk about that tomorrow. Yep. Cool. Yes.
Yeah, I think I only got to step 6, but I had one of the best intercession times, I think, alone that I've had in a very, very long time, where I was like, wow. So I don't know how this kind of built up to that, but I didn't. It's like I just got lost in intercession for a good chunk of time. So.
Good. Yes.
Yeah, maybe I'll add to that. I like going back and forth, and I noticed that I think if I would have jumped right into intercession or prayer, like even the prayer petition, I think it might have been surface level drier. But because of that process of then going back, I noticed it was just getting deeper. And again, same thing when I was in intercession, it was a powerful time. I found myself just interceding for a situation. And yeah, it was really cool. I think the kind of continuing and changing it up, it just felt like it was getting deeper and deeper, and just getting more and more out of it. I just loved it.
Good. I'll try to make sure. There's one of the other versions that I may not have with me, but the others I'm pretty sure I do. So I'll try to make sure to attach those to that email I send out tonight. So since you guys like it so much, yep.
It's crazy how fast the hour went by. Oh my, 5 minutes for each thing. Honestly, could have spent another hour on each of them.
Yeah.
And it was kind of convicting, how much of a day do we take to pray? And if an hour can go by that fast, yeah, how much more time than 5 minutes a day can we spend praying?
Yeah. I particularly like using this tool in the US especially, because I find that a lot of times, and I think it's because of the media situation here, but Americans seem to have shorter attention spans. And so then it's like we have less bandwidth for prayer, you know? And I find that this tool helps people develop their capacity, you know, for extended prayer. And so I really do find it helpful here especially. And interestingly, also in India, which is what leads me to believe it may be media related, because they're more media, you know?
Really?
Yeah. And so it's like the countries that have, you know, lots of that, we've like developed a shorter attention span. So yeah.
I think if you say like go pray and do intercession for an hour by yourself, I would be like, oh man, that's kind of a long time. But like with this, like 5 minutes, I can do that for 5 minutes, and then as soon as it changes, you switch to a different like topic, and it felt
Mhm.
like a buffet of variety, you know, and like while going deeper and deeper, and
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed it.
Good.
And I also think the scriptures, like I went through every one of the scriptures on it. It was so helpful just because it like gave such a different perspective than like, Lord, I want to pray this, and I want to pray this, and like it just like brought me back to the Word and to Jesus. It was amazing.
Good. Yeah. Glad you guys like that. All right. By way of maybe illustrating how yesterday's activities might be incorporated in disciple making in a way that you hadn't thought of. My sort of normal go-to immediate follow-up for people who enter the kingdom, right? Who choose to follow Jesus is what I call greatest blessing. So basically, I'll tell them, you know, it is a blessing to know the Lord. It is a great blessing to help others come to know the Lord. It is a greater blessing to start a new spiritual family, so like a simple church, right? And it is the greatest blessing to help others start new spiritual families. And basically, I want to help you start on that journey right now. And so, one of the very first things I do with them is ask them to make a list of 100 people that they know, like you did for your homework last night. You know, so friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, classmates. Try to list 100 people that they know, and then I ask them to pick 5 of those people that they would like to share with right away about the decision they just made. So list of 100, pick 5, and then I'll equip them on how to share a testimony. Although for a brand new believer, essentially that is just why I chose to follow Jesus. That's it. You know, why did you choose to follow Jesus? And then I'll equip them in some way to share the basics of the gospel. Usually, if I have just done that with them, whatever format I used with them, that's the one that I'll do. And then we'll practice. And so I'll say, okay, the first of your 5 people is your cousin. So pretend I'm your cousin. Share with me why you chose to follow Jesus and, kind of how to follow Jesus. And then they'll go through that and I'll make suggestions. I'll point out, oh, you forgot this, or, this wasn't quite right, or whatever. And then the second person is your mom, right? So pretend I'm your mom and share with me. And so we'll do that again. And then the third, and then the fourth, and then the fifth. And then I'll make an appointment with them when we're going to get back together again. And I try to make that within 48 hours. So, maybe the next evening, the next day, or, whatever, but within 48 hours. And I ask them to go share with those 5 people before we get back together. And if any of them want to follow Jesus, they go through that same process with them, right? And make sure I have their contact info and everything. So then 2 days later, we'll get together. If they don't show up, I know where they live, right? No, I have their contact info. But let's say we meet back up and they didn't share with anybody. So I'll start troubleshooting that. It's like, do you need me to go with you? Do you need more practice? Was it, purely an opportunity issue? What was it? But just trying to figure out how to get them to actually share about their new walk with the Lord. And then if they did share but nobody believed, that's all right. I am thrilled the fact that they're sharing with some people. And so a lot of times we'll pick some more people on their list of 100 and say, great, before we get together, why don't you share with these people too? If they shared with some people and one or more of them believed, I'm even more thrilled. But then I make sure, did you go through this whole process with them? If not, hey, let's go back, let's review, how to do that. And so then send them back to go through that whole process with those people. If they went out, they did share with some people, one or more came to faith, and they went through all that with them, that person is gold. Seriously, that person is gold. So we talked about the kind of person of peace or household of peace. My assumption at that point is that is a person of peace, And so I will prioritize that person, the relationship with that person, pouring into that person, investing in them. And so that's kind of my go-to kind of follow-up. So you can see that ties into a lot of the things that we covered yesterday. Questions about that or comments about that?
How much margin do you fit into your life for new believers?
Yeah. For those kind, a lot. And interestingly, just anecdotally, the older I've gotten, the more margin I leave. Part of that is probably because I'm learning over time to hear him more clearly. And so maybe I get interrupted more often, and so you learn to leave more margin because you're going to need it, So, yeah.
What do you mean margin?
I think she means like buffer time, extra time. So like if I think I have, 16 hours worth of things that I have to get done today, I have no time to respond to interruptions or unexpected opportunities. Is that where you were going with it? That's how I was hearing you. Whereas if I schedule, 8 hours of actual responsibilities, that gives me another 8 hours that I'm available to respond to unexpected opportunities, And so I was just saying the older I've gotten, the more margin I tend to leave so that I can invest in those unexpected opportunities. So, yeah.
Can we hear you too on that, like for your life margin? I'm kind of curious to hear for both of you for new believers. I would also include
Hello.
Yep.
All right. So the question is margin of time for unbelievers. I kind of go when it's hot, I'll give time. And if I don't have someone around me who is following the voice of the Lord, like the ones that Curtis said, these are the ones that are gold. If they don't have those kind of people, I'll give whatever time is necessary to be a servant, but probably won't invest a great deal of time. I think part of the thing is that apostolic leaders are very good at empowering others to do the work, which means they don't create a dependency, which other gifts will create. Evangelists will create a dependency, as will shepherds and teachers. Apostles are allergic to dependency. So I'll measure if distance is what's needed sometimes. But if they're the gold ones that Curtis talked about, I'll make time and want to take them on trips and things like that if I can. That's usually where I invest a lot of time. I'll take them on a weekend trip with me somewhere. And we talk till all hours of the night, and then I get up to teach all tired. Is that what you want?
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Also, just one thing I'm feeling prompted to mention related to the evangelism thing yesterday. It always amazes me how God can hit a straight lick with a crooked stick, meaning it's amazing how he can use our sharing even when it's not ideal. But having said that, I think you can just tell from the amount of practice you did yesterday, you do get better with practice. And it is better to have a way that you can share with, clarity and confidence than not to have a way, even if it's not ideal. So to illustrate that, I remember, I don't know if you're familiar with Evangelism Explosion, but it's a training on kind of a canned way to share the gospel, where it includes that, and he uses some diagnostic questions, and it's great for the appropriate audience. But some of the questions would be like, if you were to die today and go to heaven, and God would ask you, why should I let you into my heaven? What would you respond? And then there's three kind of key diagnostic questions. But anyway, all of them make zero sense to somebody with, kind of a typical Chinese worldview. It makes all these assumptions that are totally nonsensical to them. And so there's this group that's going to do this big evangelism explosion training in China. And in my heart, I was thinking, that is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. Why would you waste your time teaching that approach when it's so inappropriate? But they went in, they did the training. The people who were trained went out, and they led tons of people to faith. And so I was just like, I stand corrected. That was not the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I still think, wow, what might they have seen if they'd use a little more culturally appropriate way? But the fact that they were sharing the gospel, even if it wasn't ideal, was still very powerful. And God used it for amazing things. Having said that, the practice portion at the end of that 3/3 process, if you don't have any application points, or it's application points that don't really lend themselves to practice or whatever, you can always use that time to practice testimony or gospel sharing. That is a great time to pick up new ways to share the gospel. So like if you don't have a way that's kind of crafted for Muslims, learn one. If you don't have one that's crafted for Hindus, learn one. If you don't have one, and so you can get several. And I really liked one thing Joe said. He said his kind of favorite is sort of a creation to new creation story. I would really encourage you to, fairly early in that line of kind of learning new ways to share, have that be one of the ways, is a creation to new creation story. And here is why. That can be adapted so easily for different worldviews. It's just you include different aspects of the story or different portions of the story that particularly relate to that worldview. So like if I'm doing that with a Muslim, I'm going to hit on all of the prophets shared by Islam and Christianity. So, I'll hit starting with Adam, and Moses and so on, all the way up to key at the end, John the Baptist and Jesus. And suddenly it's way more relatable to Muslims. And then there's, with Chinese, I would do that, and my emphasis would be on the relational aspects, right? And so for any worldview, you just change some of the details that you include. And another really nice thing about it is it's scalable time-wise. You can do a version that's like 2 minutes and cover creation and new creation, or I have a friend who's done a 2-day version. He's in a tribal storytelling culture, and he told a version that lasted 2 days. So it is scalable in time. It's easily adjustable, so that you're not having to like relearn all these things that maybe you're not familiar with about the culture. If you can just get enough insight to craft that one story, it's really flexible. So I would encourage you at least some point early on to learn a creation to new creation story. Yeah.
Paul did in 11 verses in Acts 17.
Yeah, okay, so 1 minute or minute plus. It takes a little over a minute to read that. Yep, okay. Oh, and before I forget, homework tonight, similar. On page 35, there's a sample prayer of confession that I wrote. So my secret sins. But I want you to write your own version, kind of in a similar format. And then read Matthew 5, 6, and 7 yet again. And then journal. And that'll be tonight's homework, okay? All right, so what we definitely need to talk about still this morning is prayer walking. So I would like you to turn in your booklet to page, where is it? Okay, let's try 33. Yep, 33, you got it. So I'm going to just highlight some of this. The first point there, join with others. Even as a strong introvert, I readily recognize that it is a richer experience to prayer walk with someone else than by yourself. But to be totally honest, I've still prayer walked more by myself than with other people. So you can definitely do it by yourself, but if you're with others, there are all kinds of advantages. One is if you engage people in conversation, one of you can be focusing on, taking the lead in the conversation. The other person can silently be praying for that person's heart and also jump in with, at key points with additional insights that can be helpful. You can learn from the person that you're prayer walking with, and they can learn from you. Because God speaks to each of us differently and in different ways. And so then you have the advantage not only of hearing God and how he speaks to you, but you are also discerning, that is super interesting how he is speaking to the other person. And very often you'll experience sort of this building. It's like, I'll notice something and pray for that, and then the other person builds on it, with another insight that I didn't have about it, and then I can build on that. And so it just lends a depth, to the prayers. And in some cases, in some places, there's a security advantage of going in pairs. And then a lot of times, like if you have a spouse, or whatever, so you have a man and a woman together, it opens up the field a little more depending on the culture, on who you can appropriately talk to. That's a real factor. And so, there's all kinds of great reasons to join with others in doing it. I want to jump down to point 3. Basically, you could think of that as how you kind of determine what to pray for. You can base it on observation, so just things that you're seeing in the environment. So, for example, let's say you're prayer walking through this suburban neighborhood and you see a child's tricycle in a yard. That could lead you to pray for the family dynamics in the home, right? It could lead you to pray for children in general in the community. Depending how your mind works, that might prompt you to pray about transportation issues. I have no idea, but the fact that you saw the tricycle sparks some ideas of things to pray for. Secondly, research. You can research ahead of time. So maybe you know that this particular community has an unusually high incidence of domestic violence or drug use or, what have you. Well, knowing that can help guide your prayers. So I'm pretty sure we're going today to Clarkston. Well, Clarkston is known as the most diverse square mile in the whole U.S. There are so many people groups in such a tight area. Well, that's great to know, because that's wonderful for praying for the nations. You can cover the world just walking through Clarkston. Lastly, revelation. So not based on anything that you're seeing with your physical eyes, nothing that you have researched, but God just nudges you to pray around an issue. It could be through placing a picture in your mind or just an idea or a concept. And so all of those are great ways to determine what to pray for. I will add one more that you could get from the next page where it says themes for prayer walking, is you can pick a passage of scripture and then the themes that show up in that passage, use those as guideline for what you're praying for wherever you're walking through. But we're not going to do that one today. We'll mainly do these either observation, research, or revelation. Then I would like to let's jump all the way down to where it says the 5 pressure points at the bottom. These would be places that you might want to pay particular attention to when you're prayer walking. So centers of government, commerce, education, communication, and spirituality, right? So courthouse or a police station, something like that for government maybe. Businesses, stores for the commerce, schools for the education centers. If there's offices for some kind of a media company or something, that would be a communication center. And then spiritual centers, that could be mosques or temples or churches or, other things like that. And the reason we want to pay special attention to those is those all have are sort of leverage points in society. They have, some level of undue influence, for their size. And so focusing efforts on those sorts of places is often a good idea. Then let's jump to the next page, and I want to mention those blessed prayers. So this is an acrostic that I like to use when praying for people as I prayer walk. So the acrostic is for body, labor, right? So their work, economics, their finances, and then social for relationships, and spiritual for obviously their spiritual life. And you may want to, for the E, some people prefer to do emotional, health instead of economics, and then they'll cover the finances in with the job, which is fine. But anyway, just to give you ideas of things to pray for. So when prayer walking, I strongly suggest constantly being alert for leadership of the Spirit on whether He would like you to interact with individuals that you encounter, on your prayer walk. And so interestingly, I mentioned I really am a strong introvert. And so any interaction with people is awkward for me. Has nothing to do with it if it's about the kingdom or not. But interestingly, I find by far the most comfortable that I am in interacting with people is around praying for them. It's like I'm way more comfortable with that than any other thing. So I particularly like prayer walking for that reason, It's just way easier for me to interact with and then share with people, if that's it. So because I am, socially awkward and all of that, I have a pretty simple way. So it's kind of that I usually approach it. It's kind of like my art with the ducks, It's very easy to emulate. So most often I'll say something like, if I see somebody that I feel the Lord wants me to talk to, I'll say, excuse me, I or we are just kind of walking through the community, praying for the community. Would you have any ideas on things that might be appropriate or helpful for us to pray for? And who knows what they'll say? They may say, I have no idea. I'm not from here, just visiting, or, I honestly have no idea, or they may jump in with something, or I don't believe in prayer, but it doesn't if they give me something to pray, it's obviously downhill from there, right? We'll go into that. But if it's any other thing, then almost without fail, I'll follow it up with, well then, is there anything I could pray for you about, right? And if they didn't give me something at the first question, they probably won't give me anything for the second question either. But then, they'll usually say, no, I'm good, or, not really, not really interested, and again, most cases, I'm going to follow up with something like, well, I'm super glad that everything's perfect in your life. Would you mind praying for me about some stuff? And then they usually go, good one, And so then I'll say again, seriously, is there anything I could pray for you for? And it is amazing how many times they say, okay, yeah, my mom's going to have knee surgery next week, or whatever. I'm serious. It's like the majority of the time, You go through that, and at any point they might say yes, but by that last one, can you pray for me then? It's like almost always, it's like, no, that's what they're thinking. And it's like, okay, you can pray for me. But anyway, so if that helps you, whatever. There's all kinds of, people that have more social skills and stuff that they'll ask, if you could ask God for anything, what would it be? Or, whatever. But for me, this, do you have things that I could, ideas for what I could pray for the community? If not, hey, is there anything I could pray for you about? And so on. And super often, and not just in the U.S., I've done those all over the world. And it's amazing how many places those lame lines can work, But so then if I'm praying for them, and a lot of times if they're a believer, they'll let you know at that point. I mean, when you ask, can I pray for you? A lot of times if they're a believer, they'll let you know. And so that's great to know. But I'll pray for them. Whatever they asked for prayer for, I'll focus on that. But then I usually throw in these topics, right? Health, their work or their finances, maybe their emotional state, their relationships, their spiritual life. And I don't pray what I call Benjamin Franklin prayers, right? So, we're in Benjamin Franklin and Poor Richard's Almanac had a saying, early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise, which is great, a lot of truth to that. But I'm not interested in modeling or focusing on just what they can get out of God, like a vending machine in the sky. I was actually a little uncomfortable this morning at our opening. So what I'll do is I will pray for their health in order that they can be a blessing to others, that they can live a life pleasing to God, I will pray for them to have a good job and to be an encouragement and, help build a productive society so that, people can live full lives. I'll pray for their finances so that they can afford to be generous and help those who are in need. I'll pray for their relationships in order that, all of these things, their spiritual life to be full and rich and deep, for them to know God intimately so that they might make him known to others and be an encouragement and a life giver for those people. Even if you're praying for a believer, or maybe especially if you're praying for a believer, this helps shape their conception of God's intention for us. The Abrahamic blessing was, you are blessed to be a blessing. Through your seed, right? Every family on earth will be blessed. That Abrahamic blessing never was repealed. That's God's intention from then all the way through till now. And, till the end. And so modeling that is often a revelation, whether they know the Lord or whether they don't. If they do know the Lord, look at the praying for them as the beginning of a training opportunity, right? If I know they're a believer and I'll pray a prayer like this over them and I'll kind of point out, the type of prayer I was praying, I teach them the acrostic, the BLESS acrostic. I'll cast a vision for them prayer walking in their community. What if you're prayer walking in a community that you're not even from, and you encounter a believer and you're able to give them a vision for regularly prayer walking their own community and how to do it. And by the way, invite them to go with you on the rest of your prayer walk. You may have just changed that community in a very direct way. They are equipped and envisioned to be reaching out to their community probably in a way that they had never even thought about and that they had not felt equipped for. You can do that in one interaction with them. So it's not like, oh, you're a believer? You know, quick, let's move on, let's find an unbeliever. No. Invest in that person. That may be a person who's going to be key to reach that community that wouldn't have before. So invite them to go with you, coach them up on the blessed acrostic, all of that. It's a coaching possibility. And if they're not a believer, it is very frequent that you pray that kind of a prayer for them, and they will many times be interested in a spiritual conversation, you know, and follow it, you know, listen, their story, your story, God's story, right? Listen to them. They're telling you how God has been working with them, what some of their barriers or, you know, issues are with God or with the church or, you know, whatever. And you never know what's going to happen. God will always surprise us with opportunities that start because we're broaching the, you know, spiritual issues. We're demonstrating concern. To me, that's the most powerful thing, other than, I mean, obviously, it's all guided by His Spirit and all of that. But I mean, even from you know, leaving the Holy Spirit out of the picture, the most powerful thing about prayer walking is demonstrating genuine concern for somebody. Because think about it, how many times do we encounter other people who aren't our friends or family who demonstrate a genuine concern for us? And retail personnel do not count, right? We're not talking about people who are trying to make a sale, right? But demonstrating genuine concern, lots of times people will literally cry. They will literally cry because of that. So let's be alert for that. So I want to tell you a story that's kind of a cherry-picked, my best prayer walk, you know, experience ever. But before that, any questions or comments about what we've talked about so far? Okay, well, let's start with Avi and then go to Jacob and then anybody else. I think they were the first two. It was pretty close there.
Just the one thing on it, it said important elements of prayer walking. It said unity and decide on a leader. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so that was sort of for really large group efforts. So a lot of times we'll bring together like what I refer to as the city church, will be like all the house churches in a geographic area, and maybe they're going to collaborate together to prayer walk a part of the city, and so having everybody kind of be on the same page as to what the goals are, what are the parameters of where we're trying to cover, and you know, things like that. So it's more for that type of big event. Yeah, just giving instructions like, okay, you guys are on this street from, 6th to 18th Street, on Fletcher. You guys are doing, just somebody to organize it. So that's for a very specific situation. Yep. Yeah.
And it really stands out in a culture where everyone just walks by people and they don't take the time of day. So the fact that you just stop, I mean, that actually shares something like, and you could point that out, like say it, you know. I've had literally people say like, no, I really do want to pray for you. And I'm like, yeah, I actually do care. If I didn't care, I would walk by you like every other person here, right? There's times you could just say it, like, you know, yeah.
All right, any other comments or suggestions? Okay, so again, this story is a cherry-picked story. This has not been typical of what I've experienced on prayer walks. But when we first went to China, like if this is South China, like this would be Guangdong province right here in the kind of the very southeast. And so I started working on an island that was right here. And it was super unreached. And so I was on that island and prayer walking. We lived in the capital city, which is about where those dots are. That's where we lived, and it was the largest city. And so I would prayer walk the whole city. And I was doing that one day and encountered somebody who was an acquaintance of our family. And she was very unusual. So at that time, this was just being given provincial status and being made a special economic zone. But up until then, it had been a total backwater. And so literally, you could count the number of people on that whole island that had college degrees on your fingers. She was one of them. She had a college degree. You could also count on the fingers of one hand the number of Communist Party members there were. She was one of them. So she was like unusual, very prominent person, and we knew her. But anyway, so I was prayer walking and I encountered her, so of course stopped to talk with her. And then she had mentioned a problem she was having at work. And so I said, can I pray for you about that? And, she's obviously an atheist as a Communist Party member, but she didn't want me to lose face, so she said, sure, you can pray for me. So I prayed for her about that situation, and then I prayed through that bless acrostic. And for her and her family, she was married and they had a daughter who was probably 6 or 7 years old at that time. And so prayed that prayer for her, and she did something very unusual. She reached out and grabbed my arm. So it's, odd for a woman to touch a man she's not related to, in public like that. So it got my attention a little bit. She grabbed my arm and she said, thank you so much. She said, that was very meaningful. She said, it's the oddest thing. The entire time you were praying, I felt this peace and this love just all over me, like enveloping me. I have never experienced anything like that before. Thank you so much. And with all of my, social skills, I said, you're welcome. Bye, basically. I really didn't know where to go from there, and kind of caught me by surprise. And then I was walking away thinking, what an idiot, surely there's something I could have said, but it was just like caught me off guard, and I didn't really have anything, so said, you're welcome, goodbye. And But the next day, I was out prayer walking again, and I encountered her on that same street, actually. So she kind of had this pattern, and then I happened to be, on the same schedule. So we bumped into each other again. And so I asked her for an update on the job situation. So she gave me an update, and then she said, "Could you please pray for me again?" And I said, "Of course, I'd be happy to." And so normally when I'm praying for somebody like that, I'll close my eyes just so I can focus and think better. That's just a habit. But in this case, I was squinting so I could see her because I was watching her body language. So I prayed a similar prayer to what I'd prayed before, but I didn't just pray, I started with her and her family, but then I kind of spread it out to that part of the city where she lived, and then to the whole capital city, and then to the whole island, and then to the whole country. And then because she's, educated and all of that, she had, awareness of international things. And so I started praying for global things, related to, all of these issues. And the reason I kept going and going and going is because her body language was so positive. It was just like you could tell she was into this, and she was, really enjoying it. And so, I probably literally prayed over 20 minutes. And then I couldn't think of anything else to pray for that would make any sense whatsoever. So I ended my prayer. And as soon as I ended my prayer, she said, "It happened again." She said, "That is so remarkable. The whole time you're praying, I just feel this peace and this love all around me. That is amazing." And then she said, I'm trying to think which question she asked first. She said, "Does God really care about all those things you prayed for?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "He is the creator of everything in the universe, and he has a deep, abiding interest in his creation." I said, "The Bible tells us he knows every bird that falls from the sky. It tells us he knows how many hairs are on our head. He is very concerned with all those things that I prayed about." And she just sort of nodded. And then she said, "Can God really do something about all those things that you prayed for?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "He has all power. He has all authority. He has all wisdom and all knowledge. He is present everywhere. He is outside of time. He sees the end from the beginning. He can absolutely do something about all of those things that I prayed for." And she thought about that, and she just sort of nodded again. And then she said, "Can I pray?" Not meaning right then, but meaning in general. And I said, "Yes, you can pray anytime, and he will hear you, but it won't be the same as when I pray. You see, I have a special relationship with him. He has adopted me to be in his family. So I'm his child. So I have, a relationship with him that you don't. So it won't be the same as when I pray. But it's possible for you to also be adopted into his family." And so then I launched into a creation to new creation story. And it was the longest version I have ever told in my life. It was like a full hour. And I focused on the theme of God's relationship to man, to people. And so I went from creation all the way through to new creation with that as the theme. And I finished an hour later, and I asked her, would you like to do that right now? Would you like to enter his family? And she thought about it, and she said, no, I can't bring myself to do that. If I would do that, it would mean that I would be kicked out of the party, the Communist Party. I would lose my job. My husband would almost certainly leave me, and he would take our daughter. I can't bear to pay that price. But then she asked another question. She said, can I teach my daughter to pray? That's a huge question, especially back then, because the one-child policy was still in force. You only get one child. The most important thing in life is the happiness and welfare of that one child. So this is a huge question. And I said, yes, you can teach your daughter to pray, but as with you, it won't be the same as when I pray, because she doesn't have that relationship. She said, I understand. So then we said our goodbyes. We'd been together over an hour and a half by that point, a little longer conversation the second day, right? And I then didn't see her for some time. The next time I saw her, she did something else that was very unusual. She saw me in the distance on the street, and she ran up to me. Okay, the people on that island are known for their laziness, and it's super hot and humid all the time. You will never see an adult run for any reason, unless maybe they're about to step on a venomous snake and they notice it, so they'll run long enough to get out of striking distance. Otherwise, you're not going to see it. This important lady runs up the street to me, and she says, I too am a child of God. I said, that's wonderful. Please tell me about it. She said, after you prayed for me, and we had our conversation, I went home that night and I taught my daughter to pray. She said, it was wonderful. Ever since that day, we have prayed every day about everything that happens. And it was just wonderful. And so she said, a couple of weeks ago, shortly, after we had had our conversation, my daughter and I were standing in line to buy raffle tickets. There was a government-sponsored raffle of a television set. And it was to raise money to care for handicapped children. And so they were standing in line, and her daughter said, Mom, shouldn't we pray about this? And she said, you're absolutely right. We should pray about this. So she said, I stopped there in line and I prayed. And I said, Dear God, please help us win this television set. But even if we don't win, it's okay. We thank you that you care for our family, that you have given everyone in our family good health and whole bodies. We thank you that you take care of us financially so that we can afford to buy these raffle tickets. We thank you that you care for these handicapped children that no one else cares for, because in China, they're despised and resented. Everybody just wants them to die and quit being a burden on society, right? But she said, we thank you that you love these children, even though nobody else does. And we pray that you would use the money that's raised to give them full and happy lives. Amen. Probably fortunately, they did not win the television set. But she said, I went home that night and I was laying on my bed and I was staring at the ceiling. And I thought about what I had prayed. And I realized it's all true. you do care for our family. You have taken care of us physically, financially. You do love those children that no one else cares for. And I realized I want to know that God. I want to serve that God. I want to be his child. And I remembered how you told me I could do that. And I did. And I led my daughter to do that same thing. And they became one of the first believers, two of the first believers in one of the first churches in a movement that started and swept across that entire island, many thousands of churches. And all I'd done was pray for her twice on a prayer walk. You never know the ripple effects that might come. So, yeah. Yeah. So, as we're going to head out in a few minutes, well, we'll eat lunch and then meet out front. Is that right, Ryan? Out in front of this building?
Yeah, so we're gonna have two campus vans, and then Joe, you said you can drive? Can you drive your van? Okay, so we'll have the three campus vans down here. Elijah and Sky will drive one, and then Joe will drive one, and we'll all get in those three vans. Leave here at 1.
Yep.
We'll be back, we have to be back here at 3, so the drivers need to set an alarm, or everyone needs to set an alarm on their phone for like 2:30 maybe. That gives you 15 minutes to get back to your vehicle, and then 15-minute drive back here.
Okay.
Is that good? Everybody got that? Because we need to be back here at 3 to process, and then we have work duty at 4:15.
Yep. Okay. We good to go? All right. Can I ask somebody to pray for some divine appointments for us?
Before we do that, I want to apologize to everyone that was in there whenever for my response to Jordan. It wasn't necessarily a good response, so I just want to apologize.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Somebody want to pray for us to have some divine appointments today? Thanks.
God, we just thank you, God. We just thank you for the testimony that we shared, Curtis, and we ask for more of that, Lord. We just thank you that we get to go walk, just speak to you freely, and Lord, just tell people of your goodness. And so, Father, I just ask that you would bring people before us that have open hearts, Lord, that are ready to receive. And Lord, I ask that you would just allow us to plant seeds into the hearts that aren't there. I just thank you for the time that we're going to have. And Father, I pray for, Lord, that you would just, that we would just be able to grow closer to you, ourselves would be able to grow closer to you in this time, Lord. And Lord, that we would just be able to, like Curtis said, just start ripple effects in this city